May I call our second set of panelists on stage along with our moderator?
Okay, I'd like to invite the members from the audience to ask questions, if you have any, to our two panelists. Yes, please. You first and second, yeah.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to our guest speakers. I'm Julie Labarda, Tourism Management from University of Perpetual Health. So my question is for Atty. Arboladura.
She's not around anymore. Yeah, she already left, so she won't be able to join us in this session.
Okay. Next person.
Okay, so we have a...
Thank you.
Sorry, but you can ask the question and then maybe, our panelists can also share some insights. Yes, kindly ask your question.
What do you, Manila having 8 tourism hubs now, what do you think is the top priority as far as heritage preservation is concerned, and why?
Okay, so we'll note that question for Attorney Solfia, but maybe in the case of Mayor Treñas, if you have actually some points that you'd like to share about Manila, places that you think should be, let's say, prioritized for tourism for the city of Manila.
It's very difficult for me to speak for Manila, but so far as Iloilo is concerned, I think we started early on creating a Heritage and Conservation Council, which is composed of private sector. And we started identifying the heritage buildings and houses in Iloilo City through the help of USAID in 2001. And after that, Iloilo City gave tax incentives for real property taxes for those who will renovate and restore their buildings. There should always be close coordination between the private sector and local government if we want to preserve our heritage. And if there is no close coordination, then it will be very difficult.
Thank you po.
Okay, so it's an institutional arrangement that would be critical for Manila's preservation of the sites that were presented by Attorney Solfia earlier. Okay, so we have another question from the
Twinkle, I'll
lady.
just make a quick response on Manila.
Yeah, okay.
Because they had their consultative meeting with the private sector yesterday. So they are coming up with their tourism master plan. So it's too early to say what will be prioritized, how they will address it, and so on. But keep, you know that the mayor regularly sends an update. So I think you will also just be visiting his social media platforms, and it will be there, just to speak very quick about that one.
Right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So we have, actually, I saw a lady a while ago who raised her hand. Yes, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I am Raquel Raimundo. I am from the Philippine Institute of Environmental Planners and also a consultant to the urban poor of the City way back, and I'm now with some students of the PATS Aeronautical College, tourism students. I'd like to ask, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the CAS, specifically the Program in International Studies, for coming up with an impressive panel of speakers. And since we have a lot of students here, I just wanted to ask the opinion of Mayor Treñas and Mr. Yap.
Mr. Yap.
Okay, what do we define? Because the topic is on cities and urban places and their readiness for tourism. How do we say that a certain city or urban area is ready? I was quite surprised when our charming speaker, Dr. Cortez, said that the Siargao is not as ready as Coron is. And we have to, I think every city has its unique readiness and offerings for their tourism attractions. So I'd like to ask the distinguished panel, what would, from your opinion, would define a city's readiness for tourism, taking into consideration their unique offerings, like if it's not nature tourism that they have,
Okay.
if it's not heritage tourism, like Muntinlupa City, where do we go here for tourism?
So the elements of readiness, right? So
Thank
maybe we
you.
can start with Mayor Treñas and then Mr. Yap.
Well, first of all, I think you need to have the tourism sites. No? Otherwise, no one will go to your place. Second, you must have all the medical and medical preparedness. No? You must have the hospitals ready. In Iloilo City, we have several hospitals. Medical City is already there. Third, there must be disaster preparedness and response. Iloilo City is blessed. In less than 2 months, we already signed an agreement with Kevin Tan of Mega World to help out in equipments and capacity building for our disaster risk reduction management office. Taiwan is also helping us in capacity building. You have to predict what possible things can happen to tourists, and the city must be prepared for this. I think Iloilo City is prepared. Iloilo City was just cited by Nambio as the 8th safest city in the ASEAN, and with Singapore as the first. And we are very happy. And I can say that Iloilo City is ready for the tourists.
Thank you, Mayor Treñas. And Robin?
Right, I will address it from the commercial side of it. Number one, I think every city has its uniqueness. I think the development has to base on the uniqueness of the city. Whether it's prepared or not is debatable, because there are people who like to go back to nature, to explore nature in its own rights. In the case of Singapore, we plan our city 30, 50 years ahead, and we constantly look at the evolving changes of consumer demand. If you've been to Singapore 20 years ago, you will not have the Marina Bay area. But we know competition is heating up. We have to create new interest to attract new investment and new visitors. Now, in the case of Bhutan, because Singapore didn't have too much of a heritage for us to preserve, so we had to make way for urbanization and business. Whereas in the Bhutan, where they have a lot of land and they have a lot of heritage and culture, they carefully plan that, well, whilst we want tourism dollars, we want high-value tourism dollars. We want high-quality tourists. So in the progress of the tourism development, they deliberately preserve certain area to attract a certain group of visitors who want to go back to nature, go back to the environment. And the other aspect of it was to develop the historical, the religious, and tracking adventure tourism. So there's a lot for you to think about when you want to develop your tourism sector, is to identify which market you are looking for. In fact, one of the reasons why as a school we have just developed a university in Cambodia, and why would people say, why not Singapore? You're a Singapore company, why are you developing Cambodia? Because it's the closeness to China, it's along the Belt Road here, and a lot of Westerners want to study in Indochina, about the history, cultures in Indochina. So when you look at development, you look at the overall, where's the target market, how are you going to attract them? And I think Philippines it's about time that you draw back those colonial people from Spain, Portugal to return. Because, you know, I was sharing with Eileen yesterday, why the Australians and New Zealanders go back to London, go back to UK every year? Because there's that connectivity. Whereas here, you have the strong connectivity in the past with the Spanish. And it's about time to bring them over to showcase what you have in the Philippines that they have left behind. So to me, it's a very exciting time for you to look at the development of each of your cities to appeal to different market, different countries, and different tourists. And such a big country, you have opportunity to do that. We didn't have, Singapore is only what, 728 square kilometers. So we are limited by space, but we still make sure that we evolve with time. And you've got to do that. And important is for you as a young people, your imagination, your development is only limited by your own imagination. And you've got to speak up, you've got to participate, and you've got to share with the world about what Philippines has to offer.
Okay, thank you for your responses. Now, any questions from this side of the room, please? Yes, please.
Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Chandler Troyo Oranza from Beda College, Alabang. The question is,
Can you kindly speak louder, please?
the question is, how do you make sure that the authenticity is valid despite the changes in the development of the product in a destination?
How do we ensure that authenticity
Yes,
is what? Is preserved or
is sustained.
Sustained, okay. So how do we ensure that authenticity of the place, the products is
Is
sustained?
sustained despite the changes in the development of the product.
Despite the changes that are happening or changes in the development?
Well, again, taking Singapore as an example, we have been lamenting that the government has torn down some of our heritage buildings to make way for development. In case of a country when you have limited land space, it's inevitable that you have to make a difficult choice. However, once you have done that, you have to give back to the community by bringing back the old charm. So if you have been to Singapore before, you would have noted that some of the central area and Chinatown area have been modernized. It's the most unrecognizable Chinatown in the whole world. You go to Chinatown, you don't know that's Chinatown because there's no green roof buildings. However, as we progress as a nation, as we have made Cape Road to success, you start to bring back the old charm and recreate what we have lost. So sometimes it's inevitable, you have to lose something in order to gain something. And to sustain it, there's a lot of willingness from the private sector to preserve that. And in the case of Bhutan, the sustainability is a very strong strategy that the government used to ensure that with the limited resources of the country, they ensure that they receive quality and expensive tourists so that they do not consume and not put back. So it depends on country to country. And in the Philippines, I'm sure in Manila, the way you treat it will be quite different from Iloilo, from Manila to Cebu to some other cities, because your unique local flavors are different. And the way you preserve it, it's also quite different. So I think it's a very broad question, but I think the willingness of investors, local government, to help to prolong whatever uniqueness that you have and rejuvenate it. More important thing, as we grow older, we need to put more foundation and lift our face. So same with destination.
Okay. Thank you so much for your response. Mayor Treñas.
Insofar as Iloilo is concerned, we were able to approve an ordinance way back for the preservation of heritage buildings. And that is the reason why in the old part of the city, the old buildings cannot be torn down and new buildings built. There is a provision in our ordinance that the building permits have to go through the City Heritage and Conservation Council. if the Heritage Council will not allow the renovation because it will tear down the building, then the property owner cannot do so. Another case in point, SM purchased one of the oldest mansions in Iloilo. I think initially they planned to tear it down and put up a mall, but because of the public outcry, SM decided to restore the building and made it as their showcase for Cultura, where they offer for sale native products. The new development is in the new portion of Iloilo City, but in the old portion of Iloilo City, development is strictly monitored by the Heritage Council. And this is further strengthened by the Republic Act, which I was able to pass through Congress when I was a member of the House of Representatives, which identifies the specific areas in Iloilo City as heritage sites and must be restored. Mandated CHESA, the Department of Tourism, the National Museum, to spend funds from the national government to restore the buildings and those places.
Thank you, Mayor Treñas. Question?
Yeah, is it afternoon already?
Yes.
It's already, yeah. Yeah, I'm Ernie Teston. I'm from the Department of Tourism. My question is directed to the guy from Singapore. I've been to Singapore, but I've never been to
Mr.
Bhutan.
Yap? Okay, Mr.
Yes.
Yap.
My question actually refers to, I've encountered some readings that Bhutan has actually pioneered the concept of gross national happiness. Now, in relation to our country, we have been using It's More Fun in the Philippines simply because we are fun-loving people. Now, how has Bhutan helped actually conceptualize that concept in terms of promoting the destination or the country itself?
Right. Now, it all started with the third king of Bhutan, when 1974, when they opened it up to tourism. It has to have a common message, and it's to the royal decree that the message to the world is we need to measure economic development by the happiness index of the people, because otherwise there's no point having economic development where people feel misery. And our responsibility is to make sure that our citizens are well fed, happy, and that's the fundamental thought when they develop that message. As a result, there's one thing that they have done very well is consistency. In fact, recently there was talk about changing this gross national happiness message to something else that is more commercial. It was shot down because when you have consistency, the recall value is very strong. And what I lament about some destination is they keep changing the tagline, they keep changing what the destination is all about. And I think it's important to reinforce. I came from Singapore Airlines for 7 years. They haven't changed the tagline of a great way to fly. So when you talk about a Singapore Airline, it's a great way to fly, nothing else. And whether it's changing time, we kept to it, and we enhance it with beautiful images. You need to enhance with recent images. So to me, the message was then decreed down to the parliament. They have 3 parliament elections. They embrace it, they filter it down to the people, to the local community. So we sing in one language and we are all on the same page in terms of preserving, promoting the gross national happiness. So that is a very powerful thing that we all must remember, because as human beings we keep changing mind. Today we look at this, tomorrow we look at that, and the worst of all, we go some countries and we thought that was a great idea, we copy and we import and implement locally. And what a disaster, because we are different. Something that works in Denmark cannot work in the Philippines or Singapore. So you need to embrace that. So for them, it's the consistency of communicating with people. So I hope to answer that question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So one last question. Yes, please.
Good day, everyone, and also to our speakers. So, I'm Carnal Fane, tourism student of the University of Perpetual. So, my question is for City Mayor of Iloilo, Mr. Treñas. So, Iloilo City is known as the urban tourism center, having a rich heritage tourism. What do you consider as the primary challenge being faced by Iloilo City as far as heritage tourism is considered, and how do you deal with it?
Sorry, I cannot hear very well.
What are the challenges faced by Iloilo
challenges,
in terms of the heritage tourism
Yes, and
product?
on how do you deal with it?
The challenges really in heritage tourism is the owners of the heritage buildings and houses. Not all of them are well off and can maintain these buildings and houses. The challenge is really for the city to be able to continue to dialogue with them, provide the necessary incentives so that they will maintain these buildings. Just like last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, Senator Frank and I had met with the National Historical Commission together with the Heritage Council on how we can further enhance our old city district, which we call the Calle. And there's a lot of challenges that we have to face. We have the sidewalk vendors, which I ordered to be cleared starting next week. There are old buildings which have not been renovated due to lack of business activities in the area. And there are informal settlers which we will have to relocate. The city provides relocation site for informal settlers who will be displaced. We provided relocation site for 1,000 displaced informal settlers when the Esplanade was first started. And we continue to do so. These are several challenges which we face and which we have to overcome as we promote Iloilo City to be a heritage destination.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor Treñas, for the response. So at this point, I'd like to thank on behalf of the Tourism Knowledge Center, our two panelists, Mayor Jerry Treñas and Mr. Robin Yap, for joining us in this session on urban renewal for cities for tourism growth. Thank you very much.